Tibet recently exploded in violent protests that spread across the country and into Tibetan communities in neighbouring provinces. The protests were sparked by demonstrations against the arrest of Buddhist monks in the capital, Lhasa. The Chinese crackdown was swift. Foreign media were banned and troops secured the streets. The government blamed refugees abroad and Tibet's exiled spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama, who has long advocated a policy of non-violence, for masterminding the unrest.
Whether intentionally or unintentionally, some kind of cultural genocide is taking place.
Tibetan refugees in London and around the globe seized the opportunity to show the world the other side of the smiling face China is presenting publicly in the run-up to the Olympics.
Chinese people are sending troops, killing people, but to the media, to the world, they are just saying they are doing nothing.
These protests highlighted one of the longest-running human rights disputes in the world. Last year, Tash Despa, a Tibetan refugee now a British resident, returned to his homeland. He spent 3 months undercover, travelling the country to find out what life was like for ordinary ethnic Tibetans under Chinese rule. He found a highly militarized state which is imprisoning and torturing dissenters. Women suffering forced abortions and sterilizations. And Tibet's traditional nomadic way of life under threat as thousands are forcibly resettled. 10 years ago, Tash Despa escaped across the Himalayas. He paid a guide £75, 3 months' average salary, and left his family behind, unable to see a future in a country increasingly dominated by the Chinese.
While we're walking through, there were lots of frozen bodies. Sometimes you can see the feet, sometimes you can see the face. When you see the face, it's really scary. You know, some eyes opening, the mouth was opening, and I've never seen a body like that before, and I was really scared and thought, oh my God, maybe one day this is going to be me.
It turned out that he was one of the lucky ones.
They're shooting them like dogs.
Every year, an estimated 3,000 Tibetans make the dangerous crossing through the Himalayas into Nepal, then India, to escape life under Chinese control. On September the 30th, 2006, 75 refugees, including 13 children, were attempting the month-long trek. Some Western climbers were filming when Chinese border guards spotted the group.
रात्रि जामी मेंदाले आगदवा मेंदाले ल तेतने मेंदाले रे ता जामी इले ngachong osi
Kochi this trainer tatwas manda ketchmoji tagang staura te komba yoro komba chalo dojo ter pass ter des I'm manda ta 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 sound no shiro no so ron de sha sha sana pyo jog to chue na chodo call yoro to pass ta ta den good.
By now the group had been split. Lobsang, who was at the rear with the children, saw the troops starting to shoot at those just yards in front of him. One shot proved fatal.
Te menda jal jindora jogu tere momini do tere jogu la le tetene lapan je sakogo no mais
mami pode mami sunchu tai sare males na challe sana ma so la ta ta ma da chen gok ma da cha thon ma ding got chen thon ma ding so that thon no te chon da drifa sama sa mi se sare so ko
Lobsang was able to reach the Western climbers.
Don't worry, we'll go and bring you clothes and you'll come into the kitchen. Okay? Like a cook. Right? Stay here.
The Chinese guards searched the camp, but didn't find him. Later, he was able to escape into Nepal. Jamyang was arrested along with the children and taken back to Tibet, where he alleges he was imprisoned, interrogated and tortured. After 3 months, Jamyang was released and made another attempt to escape Tibet, this time successfully. Both he and Lobsang eventually made it to the refugee center where Tash tracked them down. But as Lobsang explained, freedom has come at a price. Since 1959, the government in exile has been based in Dharamsala, northern India, now the first port of call for all Tibetan refugees. It was familiar to Tash as well.
11 years ago, I was here too, and I stayed here like 6 or 7 days. There's hundreds of beds. People have to share, but it is really important to the refugees because they have got nowhere to go. This is the place. I slept over there, just down there, a few beds down, and it just feels strange, to be here again. Ale, kajipe? Samangan jose. Langka kau ni pe? Dam ni. Look at it.
But making it past the border guards is not the only danger refugees must overcome. Few are prepared for the harsh conditions they face on the journey.
They are working for 1 month, some are 1.5 months by foot. I work here at the reception center for 13 years, so I saw a lot of frostbite. One group where there are 15 people get frostbite. They don't have any hospital on the way, So if it is very bad, they can't do anything, They need to do amputation.
Because they claim the only other way to escape involves costly and dangerous bribes, thousands now make this treacherous journey. It is estimated that there are over 200,000 Tibetans living in exile. A group of 24 refugees who had just crossed the border agreed to be interviewed. Some were fleeing religious persecution, others wanted an education, but they all wanted their faces hidden and their voices distorted, as they feared retribution on their families back in Tibet.
잡스거나 둔데다는 좋은 거네. 찰나장 초청했는 ዝ노인들 다 체나 장 펠마르게 총총 똑바스게 되나요? 이마 일이었으면 별이 가지 피카리 때 그런 일이 있을 거예요.
인디더도 찾으리는 게 되게 다선 일코리 너무 걸리게들이 야롱이 통 벨 지터 나타 튜는 들모 야롱이 통 디지나 대공 그 땅이 야롱이 지나 정성 거는 말 가마트니 동송이 가동스가 행기지.
One refugee who was prepared to have his face shown used to be a farmer and said he was a strong supporter of Tibetan independence.
ngayo cha ana ngadu lung bena jizu ring lu sambe pen sa gemi jana su yu so re so de nang de zo de khara san an pheme ke go ga chi che bu ni ne cheshi ge so na na nie je gwa mo dong da sum da shi ge che le won go che che do an ga xing beng ne pyo rang zi gem pyo ne chi ju chi gu yos an ga pyo ge da ge che chom go che du che mi an ti ne ga do da ma ra zi me ro ko ga zo go police ga zi su che che ya me ro ko ga zo ya chi ayo go ni do 가로다죠 이도다 콘저 소개 제하다 같이가는 먼저 잡야 니그 진행도 에메르가다 인지다 딘데가 초과야 됐어 먼저 민마유 로정 챙겨 미숨 로정 정서 접수경화 농앙아 줘 마다 여러 가지 로 조심 사죠 많이 조심 사서 많이 당고 표 계다 소상 아니래 제가 니 조심 써 나사는 나랑 원하잖아 메세 띡띡가 정관나 찬스 로 니주 접신이 숨주 수업도 것도 로 조심 당다 정관한 데
The last time there were mass riots in Tibet was in 1989. In response, China imposed martial law. In the weeks that followed, the US Congress and the European Parliament condemned the shooting of many unarmed protesters as China used lethal force to crush all dissent. Since then, Beijing has rigidly controlled reporting from Tibet. The shooting on the pass was one of the few times that Westerners have witnessed the killing of Tibetans, an incident the Chinese later described as self-defense.
This is the glacier leading to the Nampala Pass, where the shooting took place. I've learned lots from the survivors from the shooting, and now I want to go back to Tibet and find out why these people take risk to live.
Tash Despa has returned to Tibet for the first time since he escaped 10 years ago. His plan is to live here undercover for 3 months to see what life is like really for ordinary Tibetans. But in attempting to report on the realities of Tibet under Chinese rule, even with a British passport, he is risking imprisonment if he is caught.
There must be a reason why people take a risk to cross the Himalaya to get to India. So I'm on the way to meet an ex-political prisoner. I've been traveling for 10 hours now. I need to get a safe place to talk to him.
One of the first things the team noticed was an overwhelming military presence. This army convoy was several miles long. Tash had arranged to meet a man who had warned him it would be very risky to attempt to report undercover on life in Tibet. A campaigner for Tibetan rights, he has direct experience of how the state uses all means possible to monitor anyone who questions China's rule.
아주 외근년들게요. 그래. 저딴 거녀도 있나라. 아니 시질내 오는스가 갑자기 그랬다. 대체 년까지 못 해요.
그 년카 제수샤나 지나 그게 속은 년카라. 아니 또 닙도 소진한다. 닙도 뜨드지난다. 영나 그 트레그 제사도 너무나 망그스.
The team knew that filming anything, particularly the police, was extremely risky, but it was essential to document just how heavily policed the streets of Tibet have become. In a safe location on a roof, Tash revealed that the reality of his plan to live undercover for 3 months was already taking its toll.
This morning. Truth?
Yeah, the truth.
I've been vomiting in the room as well.
Sorry?
I've been vomiting.
You've been vomiting?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Wow.
Very nervous. Never happened this before in my life.
Do you think you can still do this?
Yes, I can still do it.
Many Tibetans have traditionally existed as nomads, but in the 4 decades since the occupation, the Chinese have increasingly tried to control this way of life. The government says it is improving the living conditions of nomads and will provide 52,000 with homes in 2008. But according to a Human Rights Watch report last year, many tens of thousands of Tibetans have been forcibly resettled and had their land and livestock confiscated. Pressure groups say that living conditions for nomads in the resettlement camps are grim. To investigate this, the team drove to a camp built in the middle of an empty plain, many miles from the nearest town.
This is the houses of the nomad families who are moved from the grassland. And I hear that there's 200 families right here now. Live here, it's like a little prison, isn't it? Look. It's really sad.
The camp has been occupied for nearly 2 years, but there are no public buses in or out, so the people here have little chance to travel to find work. There is no school or clinic, and with little support for retraining, the nomads are struggling to survive. As a result, alcoholism is becoming more and more of a problem.
Okay, we should go.
Okay.
I think it's no good to speak to anybody.
Why is that?
Because, he doesn't trust them.
So it's not possible to go in any of the houses?
No.
So they just fenced in behind these concrete walls, is that?
Yeah. Normal go.
The driver's increasing anxiety was justified when the team spotted 4 police cars parked, watching the camp.
It shows you how close it's always to be caught.
It was clearly too risky to try to talk to anyone here, so the team drove to another nomad resettlement camp a couple of hours away. This time, Tash went in alone, wearing a secret camera. Although there was a noticeable police presence here too, Tash was confident that he could blend in with the locals and felt it was worth taking the risk to talk to some directly.
Tanani soga. Hey.
One woman who'd been forcibly resettled from the grasslands felt so strongly about the situation of her people that she agreed to be interviewed.
너 속지 동물들 코그 니까 사메가 화샤 열차 고사메가 다그요 호닥던 거죠 너 속가 크게 그리즈가 크게 다 제치가 돈 위에 지금 다 지금 대랑 야라서 건드려 지쳐서 다 해도 하지 말다 살아라지 새끼 다 제고지 왜 제작 일을 못 자꾸 그 달고 그러면 그요 까치하게 저 샘거 로아니 똑똑 샘탄니 까치도 오메끔 저 말아 옛날 방고 만나 저 말이나 지리당 저 말름나 지득당 릉이살이 지고 지금 말 카모자가 쩌지를 다 동네 니 롱이 동로 저거 저
Concerned that Tash may have provoked the interest of the police by talking to locals, the team immediately left the area. But the constant fear of being caught was taking its toll. And once they were well away, Tash wanted to unwind briefly by reliving a memory from his childhood.
What are you trying to do?
Try to catch the little animal. You have got 2 holes. If you blow here, the other side you hold the plastic, it's coming out.
How do you know that?
Because I used to play like this when I was in Tibet. What do you do?
But after a few minutes of relaxation, the team was sharply reminded of the challenges they faced when Tash realized that catching hamsters may have drawn unwanted attention.
Bob, yeah? Could you put the camera away, please?
Why?
There's a police car behind us, and I'm really suspected that they're following us.
Having followed for some time, the police car overtook. Shortly afterwards, the team came to a roadblock. It's virtually impossible to travel freely around Tibet. This was to be the first of many checkpoints on this journey, giving direct evidence of how the Chinese control movement, one of the ways the government prevents uncensored information getting out. With tapes in the car that could lead to those on camera being arrested and imprisoned, every checkpoint was a tense encounter.
This is the 4th checkpoint we have to go through today. All drivers and there's more down there as well.
Really?
And we don't want them to search our luggages and find our cassettes.
There was good reason to fear for the safety of those who had agreed to go on camera. Human Rights Watch has reported that any Tibetans who challenge Chinese authority may be subjected to detention, torture in custody, and other illegal abuses. Tash was hoping to meet with a monk who had personal experience of such treatment. He'd served several years in prison after being arrested for supporting a Free Tibet campaign. But the many checkpoints on the road meant that the team arrived too late to make the pre-arranged rendezvous.
Tomorrow I'm meeting our contact, but he's really nervous to meet in the local area, so we have to find a place. I think it's worth taking risk because without taking risk, nobody knows what's happening, down here and in Tibet.
The following night, after more negotiations by phone, a safe location was agreed. The first thing the monk revealed was that some toys labelled "Made in China" may in fact be the products of forced labour in Tibet. He said that if anyone doesn't complete their assigned quota, they are tortured.
리키다 다 스트클리마도 용나 저직다 몸이 나 납치 체사도 들이서서 군지 특구 참아 할게요. 다 우도 당 안나르키지들이 있어요. 디들이 아니고 이 당한지나 시르기나 로가 안나르키지들이 네 로스톨 니울리다니 마라 깜티 하르가나 키네이달리 디들이 우도 스트클 리마 오야 yelare tumde chagrinda khirmeni tumu lu tangna dana ta tumu ngona pitangna dana ta tumu manga teidalida wond mara ta chi yanak ta makhonu te kharsang ta ta chi ta khichem te jakochir.
The UN Special Rapporteur on Torture says that the use of torture is still widespread in Tibet. In a report in 2006, he said methods included beating with sticks, electric shock batons, hooding, and sleep deprivation. China said the report did not conform with reality and claimed the government had made effective efforts to prevent torture. Tash had been trying to make contact with others who claimed they had been tortured, but anyone who had been through the Chinese penal system was understandably nervous about discussing their experiences. One man was prepared to be filmed, on condition that a safe location to meet could be established. The next day, with a secure meeting place agreed, Tash was able to talk to a man who claims he was arrested simply for handing out pro-Tibetan leaflets. He says he was charged with splitism, a crime from the Cultural Revolution used to describe anything that challenges the authority of the Chinese government.
가서니까 그것이 이주리 때 돈을 니게 뒤라 그 좀 맞던 거. 어떻게 해도 거. 어떻게 시작도 거. 좀 하나 안 되는 위대한 나서거든요. 실제로 생각나. 다또 이게 나 좋고 다 현에 나 좋고. 제 tamam 의견 놀아서 거든요. 근데 짧은 코스는 대단한 딱 급. 저 속도 이러나? 나는 소화 어제는 봐도 늘 소화를 못 하고 소화를 그렇게 땅도 매주 계시는 너무 그게 어디서
Despite years of torture and imprisonment, this man is determined to continue to fight the Chinese. More recently, he has been investigating the government's population control policies.
원신다 원다 야나가 맞을 공세거든요. 뒤는데 원은 사회적 세계. 다르고 원무침도 우kam나 원무침. 사회나라 지금 몇. 네원데 페이지도 단위 좀. 우kam한데 이거 그래서 너무 급장인 게 제일 고쳐 근지 거는 않고. 다만 진짜 저기 잡아줬지. 그래서 때는 럭터리 군데 이거는 했다. 나도 근데 니지나 이거 토스나는 문턴이
Tash Despa has now been in Tibet for over 2 months investigating life under Chinese rule. After talking to forcibly resettled nomads and those who say they've suffered torture and arbitrary arrest, he is now investigating another way in which the Chinese allegedly attempt to control the Tibetan population.
I'm on the way to meet a lady who are like many women, had a forced sterilization, and she's very nervous. So we had to go to at night so that nobody can see us. So far we have been very lucky to speak to these people without any problems with police. So we're hoping it will go very smoothly tonight. The house should be down here, so we're nearly there. I can see the lights.
She says she had a child out of quota under the terms of China's one-child policy. As a result, she was given the choice of either a fine she couldn't pay or sterilization.
작산에 정을 트레이너 좀지. 그러는 말. 트레이너는 다 잡는 주되는 거.
정말 잠부를 시작하는 거래.
그 잼부를 잡는 소들이 해는 주는 거. 그 잼부를 군하는 거네. 다 작대주 개만이나 작대주 도무지 나나 잘못 쓰도. 내가 지지들 걸 작는 거 찍어서. 내가 작전에 그이가 속단하던 그 사진이 주죠. 세대는 거니. 그래도 저 내가 작전에 제대로 쓰고 있게.
The Chinese government says the one-child policy does not apply to Tibetans. But this woman's experience is far from unique. In 2002, a UN Special Rapporteur said women in Tibet are subjected to forced sterilization, forced abortion, coercive birth control policies, and the monitoring of menstrual cycles. China is able to exert this intimidating control over the people of Tibet partly through sheer numbers. Migrant workers from China have flooded into the capital in recent years, encouraged by the government. Official business has to be conducted in Mandarin, so Tibetans are at a significant disadvantage. As a result, observers estimate that around half the population of Lhasa is now Han Chinese, and the vast majority of businesses are Chinese-owned. It was these shops and offices that bore the brunt of Tibetan anger in the protests over recent weeks. On condition that he was interviewed well away from the city, a man has agreed to talk about how the Chinese are dominating business and commerce. He feels that through linguistic and bureaucratic barriers, ethnic Tibetans are being excluded. Since the railway connecting Lhasa to Beijing opened in 2006, Tibetans fear the process of Sinicization has been accelerated because it has become easier for Han Chinese to settle here. It's also been claimed that the railway is used to export minerals and raw materials to China's industrial heartland to fuel the country's economic growth and to satisfy the West's desire for cheap Chinese-made goods. China is harnessing the huge potential for hydroelectric power in Tibet as well, not only to provide power for the region but also for elsewhere in China. Hundreds of dams have been built and numerous valleys flooded. According to pressure groups, these projects have often been carried out with little regard for the local population. They sometimes know nothing until the floodwaters start to rise. The inhabitants of this old people's home had only a few hours to rescue what they could before everything that remained was lost beneath the rising waters. But controlling Tibet's water is not only about hydroelectric power. 10 of Southeast Asia's main rivers rise in Tibet, including the Indus, the Brahmaputra and the Mekong. There are now dams in all their basins. With the climate in Tibet believed to be changing more quickly than anywhere else in the world, glacial melt is on the increase. So as fresh water becomes more scarce, the value of water sources will increase. With water, minerals and oil in the region, Tibet's oil reserves are estimated to be worth around $4 trillion. It is unlikely China will loosen control. So far, the team had managed to avoid the attention of Chinese security. But when a group of American protesters flew an anti-Chinese banner on Mount Everest, surveillance on foreigners was significantly tightened everywhere. Tash had arranged to meet a student active in the Free Tibet movement, but because of the increased security, he got nervous and pulled out.
A few months ago, he was helping a monk to find a new place because the monk was new here. And then after a few days, the security come to him saying that don't contact with monks. I thought he was definitely going to talk to me, and I was really confident, but I didn't know he was being watching and following. So today I spoke to him, and he said that he's been followed and watching. So I'm glad he didn't talk.
Does that make you worried at all that you're being watched?
Yes, because I've met lots of people, who I don't know and don't really know, so maybe, one of them is a spy and is still watching me. I should be really careful now. I've got to be nervous now.
Oh yeah?
Yes.
Fear of the security forces is ever present in Tibetan life, and because monks have so much influence on the Tibetan community, they are especially closely monitored. Whenever a large gathering takes place, the troops move in. This secretly shot footage from a religious ceremony in 2006 clearly shows how the Chinese make sure their presence is felt. Soldiers constantly search the crowd and very obviously film everyone there. In mainland China, it's thought that there is one soldier for every 1,400 citizens. In Tibet, the estimate is one Chinese soldier for every 20 Tibetans. The capital, Lhasa, is as far as most tourists get. Here they head for the monasteries. As they take photographs of the monks going about their daily routines, few realize the degree of control being exercised all around them. Despite this, Tash managed to make contact with a monk who was willing to talk about the lack of religious freedom in the monasteries. Tash wore a hidden camera so no one would know the monk was being filmed. When the US criticized China for limiting religious freedom, the Chinese government stated that such accusations were unfounded and unreasonable, and that all citizens enjoy full religious freedom. But monks in Tibet say they don't have freedom of worship and are forced to attend meetings where they are taught that the state must always take precedence and that they must renounce allegiance to the Dalai Lama. Another young Tibetan said that in the education system too, minor acts of protest are met with heavy punishment.
강의 시대길 마음 바수다 수수마도 수수기 파마 빈치 나질래요 kuzuina nyoktaja ditondada suzumi na susugi 강의 지마테지도 다 퍼퍼란제 장마지 버시기네 다롱 다시나지 디레시 계좌에는 딱 라사라는 인데시 타다스 두디 계좌 코에 깔려가보라 마주탄 셴바기 페파다스 남주다 딘데기 시케다 계좌다 수수기무니 페발라 샤시요나이나 계좌 딘데시 치디 zontonata 자나기 쿼티도 하쿠마라 다 수수기 딘데시도 다 수수기 미치 간자 동코이네나 강이다 강이 침부시되기디 선 다주노네 다 니자 트릭디기다 베볼톤다 다 수수기 칼레지 슈디기트람 자나기 zonton 다 디카송 하쿠마 타다이나 쿠주기 시존tonata 마이나 니토네시나타 마이나 zontona 다 드리기 니마니다 다시 보다 다 잘해.
It had taken almost 3 months living undercover in Tibet for Tash to gain the trust of those who had eventually agreed to be interviewed. After that long living with the tensions of possible discovery, Tash was beginning to understand the paranoia of local Tibetans about the army in their midst. Before leaving, he shared his thoughts about the Chinese.
To live like here is it's like a live in a hell, you know. As everybody knows, and they don't have freedom. They don't have human rights. You know, monks they don't have religion's freedom. Of course, the normal general people as well. So. I think this is a terrible thing, and the world should know about this. What Chinese people, you know, government doing to Tibetan.
Within days of the riots, Tash secured these disturbing images of Tibetan protesters who appear to have been shot through the heart. The Chinese put the death toll at 22 people, claiming most had been killed by rioters. The Tibetan government in exile says that up to 140 Tibetans have been killed by Chinese security forces. As the riots died down, armed troops were rounding up suspects. Hundreds have reportedly been arrested. The country was then quickly locked down, and little information then got out. Though when a group of journalists were given an escorted tour of Lhasa, their briefing was invaded by a group of 30 monks shouting that Tibet is not free. We put our findings to the Chinese embassy in London. Their spokesman said,
"The embassy has not been given sufficient time to investigate these allegations, but this programme is not serious and not objective, and as a result, not worthy of comment."
Tibetans still largely remain loyal to the Dalai Lama, and his influence was clear to see as only a handful of the hundreds of peaceful protests turned violent. But with the presence of the Olympic torch already proving highly controversial in London, Paris and beyond, as the eyes of the world turn to Beijing, this generation of Tibetans is learning that more direct action can capture the world's attention. Unless the world starts to pay attention to the human rights abuses taking place in Tibet, it would seem that the Dalai Lama's 49-year campaign of non-violence may be under threat.
Denata gchita chazgrezeta kharzanatnita kharzang gxonsita kharzang chadkshanata ti yani tgerimjinta tgjuk tami mangazk ta rongli tongju mangazk okotona chegonara ok yoba yonmar sekon mangaz ta kharzang dgi shibdiglamni shali mana ta zangangni hoge kube tat marshinnar ok khitong tomgri.
If somebody bullying, you know, one of other every day, what would you do? If you know you're going to, let him bully your whole life? or you're going to fight him back one day.